What's up, Mr. Amir?
How you doing, Mr. S? What's going on?
You since 2009.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, man. I still need to edit. Ian, in 2009, we shot a movie together in New York.
Yeah? What was that?
Brooklyn Fantastic. Still not edited.
My goodness, I totally forgot about that.
Well, you've got a month left. You can do the 10th anniversary release, not re-release, but just the release.
Yeah. Well, Amir won't even recognize himself in the movie.
Yeah, it's a boyhood, but without actually shooting continuously, right?
Oh, awesome. Well, yeah, welcome to this thing of ours, whatever it is. It's our monthly kind of confab where we talk about random topics, philosophy, movies, werewolves, ninjas, and slow romance.
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. So, Sujewa, tell me about the update on slow romance.
Did you get to read scene 1?
I have not yet, no.
How about you, Ian?
Well, I feel weird answering this if
you don't
Amir
have to
hasn't
give
read
the
it.
details, but did you read it or no?
I did.
Was it good?
It was very good. Especially there's a title in there that I raised my eyebrows and then I laughed really hard. I'll just say that.
My girlfriend read it and I videotaped it. Then I told her later that I was doing it. We got about 5 laughs.
Okay.
One scene. Maybe more laughs than all of Werewolf Ninja Philosopher.
So aside from that page, where are things at?
I have the entire script done and I'm fine tuning things. And let me know if I'm too loud. Sometimes I'm yelling. People are like, "Quiet down! Why are you yelling?"
It's enthusiasm. It's good.
Yeah. So so just like that scene 1 that you read, each scene will get a glimpse of different aspect of the characters, and the story will move forward. I mean, it's the conceit is very simple. It's about a date, number of dates between 2 people, but within that, just like Seinfeld, we can include the entire world in that, in that 90 minutes, because there's a lot of things they can talk about. So yeah, it's coming along really well. 20 scenes, about 5 minutes each. Plus, I'll have about 20 minutes of city shots, so 120 minutes.
Nice.
This weekend, I hope to finish it, get it over to Amir. Hopefully, Amir will be able to act in it. If not, we'll have to find an Amir clone.
So there's a lot of them running around.
So Amir, how do you feel about the possibility of being the leading man in slow romance?
Well, let's see how it works out. We've been talking about it for a while. It's scheduling is always a little difficult, especially since we're on 2 sides of the coast.
Yeah,
but,
Amir, the wrong city, man. You got to move to New York. What are you doing in LA?
I like LA. It's got good weather.
Yeah, we got LA, New York, and Chicago in this call.
Yeah, the major markets.
Between the 3 of us, we can create a film distribution company and reach 100 people at least.
Minimum.
You gotta start somewhere. So yeah, we're I know out here we're preparing for a big cold front. How are things looking in New York?
Weather's good, but there's fires in California, right, Amir?
They have settled down, but this time of year the fires come out. They've been getting progressively worse, but I used to live out in the Laurel Canyon, where that is definitely a fire hazard area. But right now, where I'm at right now, it's not really affecting me. But it does cause a lot of congestion, traffic, and of course, there's people who lose homes and stuff. So it's a bit tragic on that end. Yeah.
Good time to shoot your end of the world sci-fi movie.
Well, the film that I'm writing right now with my co-writer Charles is out in Chicago.
Yeah, Charles from Chicago. Charles.
Yeah. Yeah, the film is set in Chicago too.
Oh, so are you planning? You're gonna be able to get out here and work on that at some point?
I think so. Yeah, we're still in the development phase. I mean, we're working on the script right now, but I hope to be out there next year shooting the movie. Some of it takes place in Chicago and Iowa as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. You guys can hang out. Ian is an actual Chicago film critic on the
There
website.
you go.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's cool. So real quick, you used to live in Laurel Canyon?
I did, yeah.
Have you seen the documentary that came out earlier this year called Echo in the Canyon?
No, I did not see it, but I am familiar with it.
Yeah, it's really good. It's about that music scene from
Mm-hmm.
the '60s, and with a lot of cool Jacob Dylan and the Echo Band, I think they call it, doing like updates on those classic songs. It was a really fun doc.
Yeah, that whole area is full of music lore, history, and there's a ton of musicians out there still. I shot a couple films out there myself, and recorded an album called Canyon. So I do have some lineage there.
Yeah, check out Ian. Check out Canyon on YouTube. I think it's got like 20,000 views, black and white.
All right, done. Actually, I'm going to write that down.
There you go, Canyon Video, Amir Motlagh, YouTube. It's like a single take. Feels like a single take, maybe.
Probably is.
Yeah.
It's a visual album, so there's music as part of it. It's tied in together.
Love it.
So
go ahead.
about Slow Romance, yeah, we're on track to try to shoot it in November. So next couple of days we'll figure it out. If Amir can come out and do it at the end of this month, towards the end of the month, Kendra's ready to go, and I'm ready to go. So this is like probably one of the easiest movies, cast and crew wise. Cast of 2, probably a crew of 2, bunch of local restaurants, and
you have all your locations locked right now?
Yeah. I've been going to all the restaurants and eating, and
Okay.
managers. They're like, "Why are you coming so often these days?" I'm like, "Oh, we'll catch up on that. We'll catch up in the near future." I'm building up my credit with them. No, yeah, I have a bunch of locations, and also we have also I cleaned up the bedroom. So worst case scenario, the park, Sunset Park, and the bedroom. Those are my backup locations. No, we have.
That's like Linkletter's tape, you know.
Yeah, one location.
Yeah.
It's actually, I was going to ask you about that because in the script that I read, the first scene, you do reference some different locations. The characters are talking about sort of having been there, right?
Yeah. I mean, I like to ideally shoot that first scene at the Metrographs Cafe. That would establish the like sort of the scene really well, who these characters are in, Manhattan. That's a very well recognized art house. I'm gonna go talk to them and see if they will let me film. They might. They're nice people. If not, you can put this anywhere.
So is that when you're trying to get those locations? I mean, this is going to be a very dialogue-heavy movie. So are you going to try and get in there when there's a lot of people or a few people? And how do you control like that environment to shoot a film?
Usually I do when there's no one around would be ideal. But if they're closed, ideal. Second best is low traffic and a section is closed off for us. Usually that's what I'm able to get because you got to control the AC, heat, various restaurant noises. The quieter it is, the better it is.
Of course.
Yeah.
Cool.
So have you seen any of Amir's movies? Any of the shorts or the features?
No.
Yeah. But briefly, I'll just say for the audience that he's made 3 features and about 15 movies altogether. Underground filmmaker, but maybe he'll break out in the near future.
So Amir, what is your aesthetic like? Are you into the whole slow cinema scene?
I wouldn't say that. No. In terms of aesthetic, it's it varies. I do try to formalistically change my approach every time I make a film, but it's definitely all been related. So some of the films that I do tend to be slower, like The Future Man, for example. Just the rhythm of it is somewhat. I mean, you can definitely say it's slow, but it's much more experience based than it is like narrative, especially for that film.
One of my favorite movies to relax to.
Right, and you know, I mean, that's also similar to tape in that it's one really singular location. So it varies. Approach varies based on what I'm writing, budgets, all that kind of stuff.
So what compelled you to get into filmmaking and telling these particular kinds of stories, or in the way that you do?
Well, you know, I did start as an actor many years ago, and somehow the whole DV revolution was happening at the same time, and for me, having control in terms of like actually making the work was really important. So, you know, when you're out in LA and you're auditioning, there is it's a game of complete chance, right? Somebody likes you that day, casting director likes you that day. You have a certain cologne that you know clicks for them. Really, I mean, a lot of it is just these random things that happen, you know. And I was getting fed up with going on auditions, especially at that time because it was post 9/11, and for me, almost every role that I got was like Homeland, shit like that, right? So it's different now. It's very different now. But then it was like very targeted to type, and so you know, I had a friend, Andrew Twan, who was working at Time Warner at the time, and he had access to. And Twan, by the way, is now just is an incredible artist. He's got a 4-channel installation work at SF MoMA up right now. So, but at the time, he had access to what was called a Canon XL1. It was one of the real original DV cameras that was highly regarded. And
it's a holy grail.
It was the holy grail, right? And we snuck in at night because we had access, and we grabbed a bunch of gear. And shot a movie over the weekend and then just returned it, you know. And then ever since that, I had been hooked into the process of making films.
Yeah, and I discovered, I connected with Amir in 2005, I think. He just emailed me because of my blog, and I showed some of his movies in Maryland, and I've been in touch ever
That's
since.
right.
Yeah, he came out to Maryland and had some adventures with the locals over there.
That's right. I do have a picture, a Polaroid of I forgot the town. Wheaton.
Yeah.
It had a great slogan. You know, I forgot what it was.
No, so I showed one of his movies at a bookstore, and a bunch of old people were there. Amir's like, I feel like very much a hipster right now.
So let me ask you about that, because I love the stories about the young filmmakers kind of not stealing but borrowing equipment, you know, kind of sneaking off with it and then returning it. Because you know, Adam Green and Joe Lynch, who make horror movies, that's kind of how they started out. Mark Maron with his WTF podcast, he began staying at the Air America offices late at night to record off of their professional studios. In terms of being a filmmaker and that kind of renegade matter of doing things, I imagine there's got to be some kind of a thrill, like a danger element, along with a ticking clock. Now that you presumably can afford your own equipment and get things done on a more above board, is any of that thrill gone, or is it still the same kind of excitement?
That particular thrill is definitely not the same because, you know, I guess my background before that through high school and stuff, it was a bit wayward. So I don't come from that background, but it definitely there was times in those days where there was questionable stuff going on. But you know, I think after I had graduated from UCLA, and then I had made my first film. I went through acting, the whole like acting conservatory. At that point, my identity had shifted, and it was just full-time art making since that time. So it's definitely that kind of thrill about getting equipment is not there anymore. But sometimes, I think, especially some of the works that I've done, it does feel that all of it feels very new because the reference points are not familiar, so that part of it is exciting for me. It's kind of just making up things as you go along.
Every film shoot, whether you have equipment or not, whether you have legally equipment or not, it feels dangerous and thrilling anyway, because there's a bunch of people involved. There's a time element. There's locations. There's budget. So like whenever I get to shoot something, I feel myself getting ramped up, like
Right.
for fight or a game or something. And when the
Yeah.
shooting is done, I can feel the energy level, like the body saying, "Oh, you can relax now." So
Yeah, it's definitely a full flow experience. It's like if you're playing, basketball or whatever, but you expand that into 30 days, right? Or 2 weeks, whatever the length of the shoot is. I mean, you're just in that state, and your adrenaline is pumping.
yeah, it's an elevated, hyped up experience, regardless. Kind of
Right.
like, I guess, but yeah, there's a lot at stake on every shoot.
Now, for both of you, getting to that place where you're ramped up, you're getting ready to go out and make a movie. Over the course of, say, a 30-day shoot, how do you manage to maintain that level of energy? I mean, at a certain point, there's probably the enthusiasm of, great, I'm starting a new project, and all of this, there's a lot on the line kind of a thing. But by week 2, I imagine you're probably tired from running around, and maybe I don't know, maybe it is easy to keep that momentum going, but does it ever start to flag, or you kind of maintain that momentum throughout?
No, I think if you're committed as a filmmaker or an artist, especially a filmmaker, making movies is the thing that excites me more than anything else. So it's not even 30 days. It's like 2-3 years usually. The script, fundraising, casting, getting ready to shoot. By the time you get to the actual set to shoot, which is sort of at the end of the process, only thing left is editing and distribution. By that time, and also it's just like a lifetime thing. I've been making movies, and Amir has also since our late teens, early 20s. So it's a daily thing. It's like you're always at 50, but when you're shooting, you're at like 75, 80, or 100. But unless you take like 5-10 years off, I think a filmmaker will always be somewhat ready to go, because it's the lifetime of, just because I've been watching football, I think it's like when you play high school and college, by the time you get to NFL, half the things you're ready to go on.
Right, and in terms of my experience, it's very sprint based, So the actual being on set time, and so the shooting time itself, it doesn't it's not through the whole year, and you're talking about 12, 15-hour days, but that's relatively a small size in terms of the rest of the year. And for me, I tend to just shoot one film a year or every other year, aside from short work. So those 20 days on set, you just got to muster up the energy for that, and then you take a week off after, and then you go into editing, but you're not spending the same type of energy editing as you are on set. It's a little different.
Sure.
Yeah, you get used to the rhythms. I mean, after you make a couple of movies, you get used to the rhythms, and you actually kind of look forward to it. I mean, I do, at least. I get all jazzed up, energized.
Yeah.
It's time to shoot a movie. Should we talk about, since the three of us are on, even though all of us haven't seen The Irishman, let's talk about the Marvel versus Scorsese debate, because that's something that a lot of people are into right now, especially in New York.
Yeah, I confess. Well, first of all, Sujewa, did you see it? Did you see The Irishman?
I couldn't find a 3.5-hour break today. I think a lot of people are just going to watch it on Netflix. It's tough to schedule 3.5 hours.
Yeah, true. I wanted to watch it, but I don't have the time right now, but I will soon.
Yeah, so apologies to Martin Scorsese if he is listening.
Well, you know he is. No,
no doubt.
No, here's the thing. I have seen The Irishman, but I have not been keeping up on the controversy. I've mostly been seeing the controversy through memes about the controversy. And like he made a statement during an interview, and then he came back to clarify it, and everybody's just mad at everybody. And if I have it correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, he made some kind of a remark about how the Marvel movies aren't cinema. But he wasn't trying to imply that they weren't movies. They were more, kind of almost theme park attractions kind of a thing, more diversions and not things that are designed to kind of stand the test of time.
Yeah,
or something to that effect.
Yeah, well, I read everything, and Richard Brody and other commentators, and Scorsese on New York Times fine-tuned the argument. Basically, he's saying, or what he seems to be saying, is that Marvel controls how the movies get made, and the kind of cinema Scorsese likes is, director-focused filmmaking, not a corporation deciding, oh, hey, we'll shoot the action scenes for you, blah, 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 It might come to the point where Marvel may not even need directors. I mean, they will, but, I can't see them letting any director do something radical that messes up their cash flow down the road. The other side of this is it's perfect Hollywood entertainment, right? I mean, Hollywood people must be totally happy with making all the money and getting all the publicity. So it's cinema, but it's just not the kind of cinema Scorsese likes or lots of other people like.
Yeah, sorry, I was flicking a message off the top of my screen. Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that, because the news came out, I think it was earlier today is when I first saw it, that Joker, which was at one point produced by Martin Scorsese, or he was loosely involved, and Todd Phillips certainly drew on Scorsese's films to make that movie. Sure. It was recently announced as being the most profitable comic book movie of all time. I don't know if it's crossed the $1 billion mark worldwide, but I know it was close. But it was shot on, for Hollywood, a shoestring budget. It was the catering budget for, I guess, James Cameron's Avatar sequels. But I'm wondering, because Hollywood just chases what's hot, if they would reserve a pocket of their expansive Marvel universe to say, okay, some director go make an off-color, off-key version of one of our villains, do an indie film, quote unquote, that will release and it'll make $1 billion too.
What do you think, Amir?
They certainly will be doing that. That is a guarantee, because this is just a runaway success in terms of capital. In terms of the Scorsese argument, I'm staying clear from that. I didn't read it. That kind of stuff. I understand. It reminds me of Ebert's call to video games in 2000. I forgot what it was, 10, 11, where he said video games are not art, and there was this big uproar. And it's a relatively similar argument in some ways, although, I mean, we're talking about the same media. But, I tend to think that it's very difficult to make an argument either way on either side of this, because especially now, media is so intertwined. It's so ubiquitous. It's all over the place, that separation between pure art, an argument could be made. There could be an argument that Scorsese, in terms of film art, is not high art either. I mean, it's very narrative focused. So yeah, I mean, it's just so many colors into this equation, and it's like, I'm over here. I'm just doing my thing with this. You guys can argue all you want on Twitter. People can, just I
It's not
mean,
going to affect our work too much either way.
right. It's not going to affect their work either. I mean, it's just not even that. It's not even that big of a deal. He has the lineage to make an argument that he wants, and it's crazy that you can't even really make those kind of arguments without like having this crazy backlash. You know,
Yeah.
it's bizarre.
And that's what struck me as odd, is because this story broke last week or maybe the week before. I don't remember. And I heard about it, and I heard there was some backlash. But then I kept hearing about it. It seemed every other day there was some new argument on that front. And I thought it went from, oh, that's kind of an amusing idea, to, wait, it sounds like people are taking this seriously.
Yeah.
And there's enough room in the world of cinema or film or movies, whatever you want to call it, to for everybody.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, I think it's kind of cool that maybe people who are indignant about Scorsese, who may never have seen a Scorsese film, they just see him as an old guy who made a bunch of movies back in the 70s and the early 90s. Not that he hasn't done stuff since then, but just that kind of perception. Maybe they'd be inclined to go and check out his films and kind of make up their minds for themselves. On the other hand, I do find it funny that you could look at a movie like The Irishman, and I know you haven't seen it, but maybe you've heard some of the conversation around it with
I've read about it a lot.
Right, but the de-aging technology that they've used in that film, a lot of digital work, which is something that we've seen popularized and sort of innovated within the Marvel films. It's a much more humorous movie than he's made. I think this might be one of the funniest movies he's made, even though it is kind of a dark crime drama in parts, which is also something that Marvel kind of interjected into the popular blockbuster. You've got Thanos destroying the entire or half of the entire world, but you've also got Tony Stark cracking jokes. So you've got the high drama and the high comedy. And then also you have the idea of, there is at least one point, and I won't spoil it, but there is a specific point in The Irishman where he references one of his other films as sort of being connected to The Irishman. And those who are in the know, because I was at a critic screening and a lot of us were kind of tuned into this Scorsese oeuvre, and there was a big laugh
Nice.
at this particularly well-placed reference. But
Wait,
that goes back to the idea.
Does the main character go watch Goodfellas in the Irishman?
No, but you are getting close to the mark.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. What was that movie he made? A 24-hour the night was
Bringing Out the Dead?
No, it was like one night. It was a full night.
Oh, yeah. After Hours.
After Hours, yeah. That would have been a good reference.
But it also is that idea that Marvel also popularized with the idea of this shared cinematic universe. So as much flack as he's giving to Marvel about the quote unquote kinds of movies that they're making, he, in getting this film out there, has sort of Marvelized his own sensibilities.
Well, I think one thing I do agree with him on is all the theaters are being taken over, it feels like, by Marvel movies. So instead of making like 150 million, they want to make like $1 billion, right? So
yeah,
it's possible that, unlike the regular public, unlike us, he's seeing behind the scenes lots of movies not getting made because they can't make the Marvel type money, right? So that could be part of the frustration, that entire way of filmmaking is going out the way.
Yeah,
maybe,
I mean, it's
maybe this is similar to sound coming in, or the film versus digital debate. Yeah, I mean, Marvel movies are fantastic visually, I mean, as entertainment. So it's just a new kind of thing that we have to deal with. So it's almost like, like experimental film, drama, comedy. Marvel movies are almost like their own specific genre.
True. And I think instead of the kind of, paradigm shifting, potential erosion, like with the introduction of sound, the Marvel style takeover of cinemas there is an answer to that, which is the very mechanism by which Scorsese is releasing his latest film, which is Netflix. This isn't a Warner's or an MGM production. It's a service that 15 years ago was sending people DVDs in the mail, And now they're releasing Scorsese's
Right.
new picture. I don't know if either of you have had a chance to check out Craig Brewer's latest film, Dolomite Is My Name, starring Eddie Murphy.
No,
That's on Netflix right now, and it's fantastic. And that's the kind of thing where I was watching it. I don't think that even got a theatrical release aside from like maybe
Right.
festival stuff, but it's really solid. So these sort of alternative platforms are offering up venues for filmmakers to go there and bypass the theater if they want to, and it's not just comic book movies or sequels.
Yeah, I prefer the movie theater. How about you guys?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I prefer it now. I definitely feel like there's some things that benefit from being in a theatrical space, sitting down and paying attention that way. It definitely works better for a lot of things. For everything, no. I wouldn't say that I prefer it for everything.
How about you, Ian, as a critic? Where do you like to watch best, at a theater or on the small screen?
I mean, I always will opt for the theater because I think filmmakers who shoot for the big screen sort of deserve to have their films shot, in the manner that they were intended, or viewed in the manner they were intended. But for something like The Irishman, I feel like in a sense it is perfect for Netflix because it's 3.5 hours long. And in a lot of cases, it does feel very episodic because there's a lot of story going on spanning like 50, 60 years. And that was sort of my problem with it. For the first hour and a half, I was really into it. And I was thinking, man, I'm glad I went to the press screening at the theater with this great sound and everything. But narratively, it lost me sort of in the middle end. And that last hour plus was kind of a bit of a stretch. And at the end of it, I was thinking, I could have watched this at home.
Yeah, movies that hit the 2.5 hour mark, I have a tough time going to the theater to see. Although those are generally the films that are decidedly made for theatrical release, and when you get the big name directors and they have the ability to shoot the way that they want and keep everything into their film, and there's nobody trying to chop things out of it to streamline it for an audience. But yeah, well, I was gonna say one thing that I think eats at a lot of the older generation in terms of master filmmakers, and it goes into this argument too, and it's one of the reasons why Soderbergh had his retirement a few years back. He got back into the game, but somebody like Scorsese, where making a movie takes a long time. Okay, so you spend 3 years making a movie, and it comes out. Let's say even if it comes out theatrically, like all these other Marvel movies, people go see it. It's on the Twitter thing for a minute, and then it just disappears, right? And there's 50 other things that are going to be trailing it, and those things become the next thing. So the cycle is completely different than it was. And Marvel, because they're churning out so much work, they're always have a theatrical release going on. They dominate that cycle. So these guys come and it takes 3 years, and you make a movie that's 3 hours long, and it's your masterpiece, 70 millimeter, all this comes out, people talk about it, disappears, and then you disappear for a couple of years too because you got to go make your own thing, and it doesn't feel as substantial as it used to for them, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. We're part of the fatigue is even if Marvel only releases 3 movies a year, we hear about them every day.
Yeah,
so it feels like they're always releasing new work, and everything is Marvel. It's just a part of the new 24/7 web news, social media thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take a look at another example, Terminator Dark Fate, which came out last weekend, that movie, tanked, and people keep talking about, well, it's a sequel to Terminator 2. It's the third, movie in the trilogy because they've gone back and erased the other sequels that they did. The last 2 movies before this were also attempts to erase the third movie and be a follow-up to 2. And what you got to remember about Terminator 2 is when it came out, it was like the biggest movie of 1991 or something like that.
Right.
But it wasn't because it had a great opening weekend or a great 3 weeks. Like we look at the biggest movie right now, I don't think it's Joker, but it's probably Avengers Endgame is the number one movie for 2019. But that's because everybody went to see it for like 3 weeks. With Terminator 2, that was back when movies hung around for months in the theater because there wasn't just this overflow of content. I mean, just like comic book movies, as we mentioned, there's one every month. There's one giant multi-billion-dollar blockbuster every month. It's kind of like the frequency of comic books that come out every week where you go to your shop and there's 30 new Spandex titles on the racks.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just everything is cannibalizing itself to the point where something holds on to the cultural zeitgeist for a week, and that's considered a success story.
Right.
Yep. Now we have good keywords to market this podcast interview, so we can move on to other things.
Okay.
So another good thing about the web and the modern way of doing things is I discovered that Vimeo has all the experimental filmmakers that I want to see. Godard, Jonas Mekas. So it's amazing. It's just there, not hardly any hype. Because I follow experimental film, I see the tweets that are relevant to it. So that's the other side, people, Hollywood, various branches of Hollywood, Scorsese and Marvel can argue about whatever, but a bunch of people can make work now, get it out, get their little followings going, have Werewolf Ninja Philosopher playing in Chicago. And that really benefited from being screened theatrically because it has an unusual structure. So once you're locked into the theater, then you're sort of forced to get into the story. You can't shut it off. Go, man, forget the slow black and white werewolf thing. So that wouldn't be possible without the modern digital filmmaking and the kind of production distribution I do wouldn't be possible even in the 90s, early 2000s. So the times come with benefits and drawbacks.
Right. Yeah. Distribution is relatively free now. That's the big difference than it was before. But again, distribution is free, but also there is 100x amount of content as it were before. So they're kind of two forces that are fighting each other.
Yeah, and I will say, as far as the question earlier about preferring going to the movies versus watching something at home. Watching something at home, certainly not for me because I haven't updated my TV in 5 years. But the potential is there to build a home theater that replicates, if you've got the right distance and sound and lighting to come pretty close to a theatrical experience in your home. I mean, I missed the 4K revolution, which is fine because I got an ad from Best Buy on my phone last week saying the new 8K televisions are out, which you can get it's brand new. So it's like I saw an ad for an 85-inch 8K television. I'm like, what are you doing? Who's this for?
When you watch it, the image will seep out into your room and it'll be, it'll take over.
I mean, the funny thing is that there's nobody distributing in 8K. There's just no content available in 8K.
I think
very little at least.
Right. I think the big leap, if I'm getting this right, is Top Gun 2 or whatever they're calling it. I think they had the teaser trailer out like a month ago or more than that, and I think that was 8K, or they were boasting that it was something that like no one had ever seen before. It's fun to see that, and it looked really crisp. But as far as the shots, there's only so many barrel rolls I can take in a Tom Cruise Top Gun sequel before I just kind of tune out. Although I am hyped to see it because I want to see Maverick again. I'm a sucker.
Yeah, I'm still releasing stuff on HD and shooting stuff on HD. So yeah, another 10 years I'll get to 4K.
That's fine because that's about the time they'll upgrade to 4K. Yeah, the ad I got for that 85-inch 8K television was something like it's on sale for $13,000. Like, again, who are you marketing this to? Not me.
That's right. Amir, in your filmmaking life of 20 years or so now, right? 20 years?
Close, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Can you talk about some of the distribution things you've done, festivals, touring with it?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean, yeah, pretty much all of it, right? Festivals. When I started, I was really into trying to get into festivals, sending stuff out. That cycle is relatively so slow, though, that it's becomes an impediment to, in terms of certain types of works I do. So the ones that are more immediate that I have control over in terms of like how the flow of it, and in terms of like monetary, in terms of bootstrapping the work, like those I want to get out as fast as I can. Once it's done, I have a relative short span where I want to push the work out and try to get it into an audience. Doing festivals where you have to wait 6 months to get some sort of letter of acceptance or rejection,
Right.
and then you wait to that cycle, the film comes out, and then you wait another 6 months to release. Again, these are kind of archaic things. It doesn't make sense in this day and age.
Yeah, regarding the earlier topic you had, Ian, about the physically being ready to shoot, the problem that I've always had was when I'm done with the movie, I immediately want to show it to people and start getting feedback and getting it out. So I've always not participated in the festivals because it's just like, it feels like death having to wait a year or months to hear about whether someone will stream my thing. But I mean, that's just something filmmakers have to get used to, unfortunately, because with certain festivals come a certain amount of, approval, press, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure,
So,
yeah, it's always a trade-off.
yeah, my trick is to try to make a number of things really fast, so that while one is going through, several months of the festival cycle or whatever, I can be onto something else, and that'll keep me distracted. Oh, one movie from Amir that I like a lot is KHOOBI. Check that one out. It's a short film. It's free on Vimeo. KHOOBI Amir Motlagh. Yeah, that's amazing. He talks about, well, we can ask him because I'm talking about Amir like he's not there. We can. Yeah, so that's amazing. That's an amazing movie. He talks about the history of Iran and the U.S. There's a movie within a movie that's like a mainstream Iranian buddy comedy, crime comedy. Then it's about his life. So I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more about that movie, Mr. Amir.
Well, I'm not going to talk about it too much because it's very short, and you watch and experience the whole thing. One thing I do want to say is that there is a piece of the thing that I love the most about it is that I had my father draw 2D cell animation, and he did it by hand. It's like a 2-minute segment or something, and I can't believe he committed to that, and I can't believe I convinced him to do that. So that always remains in my heart about that film.
Is your father an animator by trade?
No, he's not. No.
Oh,
but
okay.
he used to be. He was never an artist, but he did love to paint when he was younger, and we had a long conversation where I had tried to convince him that he had to do it again, and
Nice.
Yeah, he committed to it.
And if you watch a lot of Amir's movies, his parents are stars. I like seeing them in his movies.
They show up. Yeah, they show up.
Yeah. And I think his last 2 movies were shown in Chicago, right, Amir?
They were shown in Chicago. Yeah.
Yeah. Your buddy David Fowley did an interview with Amir.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, correct.
So let me ask. So your parents they show up in your films. Were they supportive of you? Wanting to be creative and have a career in the arts from a young age, or did you have to convince them, or what was that like?
No, I there was no convincing. It just something that had happened. It's one of those things that just happened, and they were, my big influence starting out was John Cassavetes, and him grabbing people that were close to him and shooting with them was something that really resonated with me. because there's a level of intimacy that is just inherent, right? It's not, there's the layers are already there. So, and my mom loves cinema. So this is the thing, like she, international cinema, she's been obsessed with it. And so that lineage, so like pulling them into these films is difficult, but they generally are okay with doing it, and then we don't talk about it afterwards, it's just get them to do it, and then that's it.
Yeah, and as an audience member, it's funny. It's like a old-timey sitcom where the parents are disapproving of what Amir's doing. There are segments where they're like, "What are you doing, Amir? Then this is not going to make any money. We're not stars." It's like an Iranian American, Lucille Ball type situation.
Yeah.
Or whatever. It's great.
So, was your mom? Did you get your love of movies from her? Did she?
I think I did.
Showing you things and.
Yeah. She loved. I mean, she just loves serious film. She always has, and I think I got a lot of that from her, and especially when I started learning about Iranian cinema too, like the Kiarostamis, Makhmatovs, and that, which is a different. I guess I feel more kinship or closeness to that type of narrative storytelling, which is very, it's not structured the same way. It's not structured in typical 3-act. And
yeah, it's not an American Hollywood type feel. Amir's movies are more like documentary and fiction hybrids. Yeah, to me, they kind of have the vibe of Kiarostami movies and other Iranian art movies.
So I inject some of that, and then with kind of a Western aesthetic as well. So those are kind of the two things that I probably tangle with most of the time.
Yeah, check out Three Worlds. It's a sci-fi drama, and man, is interesting because it's told from the point of view of the main character. And I only found out later that it was shot on GoPros, right, Amir?
Part of it, yeah. And again,
color grading is amazing on it. You can't tell. That's another benefit of the time period we live in. These little cameras, like my little camera, the iPhones that Soderbergh shoots in, GoPros where you can do great color correction. It's amazing. One of the things I'm going to try to do on Slow Romance is try to do what Woody Allen did with Manhattan. It's amazing. I'm sure everyone here's seen Manhattan. I know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Try to. I mean, no movie has done that in a long time. Just show off the amazing beauty of New York using the new tech in a fiction narrative movie. And I got some good feedback on Werewolf for showing off New York in a good way. So I'm going to try to do that on Slow Romance, which is now possible with the small and affordable and amazing tech that we have.
So with that, and it's going to be in color too, which is a difference from what Woody Allen did. But are you going to try and get like primarily night shots or day shots? How are you planning to showcase the city?
I think I like visually nighttime is always more interesting to me because it cuts down on what you can see. It's more like Edward Hopper painting than like TV news where everything is visible. Not being able to see a lot is good for film. So probably a lot of nice shots, but there'll be some day shots also.
Yeah, because that's one of the things I loved about Werewolf Ninja Philosopher is that nighttime kind of appeal in the black and white. It was very impressionistic's the wrong word, but it did help kind of set this tone, this vibe, especially during the longer shots. You're just kind of hanging out in the city at night. I just don't know how that works in color. It almost seems like it was made for black and white.
Well, it's on how you use color. One of the things I like about Amir's movies is he's always had good control of the image, always a high quality image. From like the first thing I saw from him in 2005, I think it was called what was the Still Lover, yeah.
Still Lover, yeah.
So that's one of the things I learned from him is, I mostly focused on dialogue in my earlier movies. Then more recently, I'm like, oh, hey, let's put some work into making the image look good. I kind of started on that since 2009 on the movie that we shot with Amir. But yeah, that's one of the things I learned from Amir, watching Amir's movies, especially for slow romance. It's ideal because I like the real life feel I get. I mean, it's fake, it's cinema, but his movies feel very real. Like you're taking a break from the internet, movies, and your own real life, and it's just like another real life. So he's able to recreate that really well.
Thank you.
So I like that. So that's the kind of thing. Even though a lot of my other movies are absurd comedies, slow romance, I want it to feel like super real. Like you're hanging out with these people, real people, going through this real thing, and in that structure, I can put in lots of real life details. So how do you make your movies feel so real, Mr. Amir?
Um, I think it's just the form, you know. I did my acting conservatory. I like the John Cassavetes stuff. I understand how actors work, and I also, you know, I live in LA, so I work in commercials. Like I work in the commercial world. I direct commercials too. So I can bring some of that aesthetic in, and when I do like something like Man, for example, the realism is just in the form, right? Is in the way that it's structurally shot, what's going on in it, and that. I don't always work in terms of realism, but yeah, I guess the answer to all that though really is that the cinematic universe is self-contained,
Yeah,
right?
I think this is where examples like Amir and maybe even Werewolf, this is where the individual director makes a difference, right? Uh, yeah, like when I see one of Amir's pieces, movies, I'm like, oh, that's something by Amir. If I saw something else by him, I would, you know, there'll be lots of little things that where the piece would feel like, oh, that's the sort of a whatchamacallit, documentary fiction blend by someone who knows cinema really well, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's the kind of thing that maybe Scorsese is saying is disappearing from cinema, when it's a large corporation creating a certain product versus an artist making a certain thing. I mean, the end result is the same. The consumer gets to see something, right? But there is a big difference, I think. Ian, how do you like all the experimental film things that I've been sending?
I have not been able to look at a lot of them. It's kind of keeping a running tally of stuff I have to get back to because I'm, you know, crazy busy.
Right.
But one thing I do want to ask about, Amir, you're working in commercials. Is that sort of how you support your film career?
Yeah, I mean, let's say for the last year, I've taken time off of that world because I've just it's it's very difficult to jump between these worlds, and I have a music side as well. So this is kind of a whole different tangent. The commercial side, though, helps me understand just process in that structure. So, for example, the film that I'm writing right now that's based in Chicago is definitely much more commercial based than something like Three Worlds or Man, which are personal pieces that that I can't hand a script to somebody, another producer, and have them completely realize what this is, right? Mm-hmm. But the commercial world helps me figure out how to do that too. Now I can navigate in that side too if I want to. Generally, I don't like to. I don't really feel a kinship to a lot of films that are out and produced because one thing about the whole DV revolution, and this has kind of always been a question that I've considered, is that it gave artists tools to really personalize narratives and create cinematic universes that are both personal and can be universal, but are kind of not cottage industry, but
Not Hollywood.
Yeah, but what really happened was exactly the opposite. It became super homogenized. Like we thought it was going to go this way, where you have all these tools and artists are going to be expressing real unique visions, and then it's basically what we talked about. It's like a Marvel universe, and so I think in general, cinema is really dealing with that dichotomy. You have on one end self-contained cinematic universes, and then you have all the commercial side that's going to be completely homogenized more and more and more. And those are where I think those are the two divergent paths. Are they going to be both called cinema? I don't know. Are they going to be called something else? Does it even matter? I'm not really sure about those answers, but I think that's where I don't know how this whole led on to that, but I feel like that's kind of what the whole DV thing was about.
Well, in navigating the commercial world and stepping into that, because it's probably a source of revenue, and also in addition to being able to learn how to make something that speaks to perhaps a wider or a broader audience, do you find that in the commercial work you do that you're able to make any of it personal? Like, can you step back and say, I recognize this commercial work as something that I did. It's got a bit of my stamp on it. Or are you just good enough to say, I can get into this system and make something, churn it out, and it looks like everything else, but that's okay because that's what the job called for?
Very few instances. And the ones that you can tell that I directed is ones that my company was able to produce as well. And generally, when we do that, we can take a $500K commercial and do a much smaller budget, still have it look like it was shot for the same amount as any other commercial, right? But it'll have some touches that you might be able to see some signatures. There is a lot of commercial directors that do that though, like Spike Jonze, for example. You can tell all his commercials. I mean, it's just because he no one's going to tell him not to do that, right? But in the end of the day, they're fucking commercials, right?
Well, I found that switching between the commercial industry work, or let's just say making work for other people paid versus making my movie, switching between the two was very tough. I was doing it in DC, working for Discovery Channel and working for other production houses. Not even massive, a mere level of commercial projects. But after spending all week working on something for someone else, I just didn't have the energy to work on my own project. Even though I had money, extra money, because these things were paying well. Like the Discovery gig, they gave me a car. They paid for the phone. They paid daily stipend plus pay, right? So I was like, wow, the money is great. Let me just put some of this into my own project. Nope. After like 7 days, I'm wiped out. Then
it's difficult.
Yeah, so it's amazing that Amir can do it. I would recommend to filmmakers, get a day job that's not in film. And then pursue your filmmaking because you're unhappy with your day job, but the day job keeps you alive. I think that's the kind of thing that will make a lot of people happy. I think switching between commercial and independent filmmaking is tough for a lot of people to do. Because once you get, like what I discovered from working at Discovery Channel, that gig for like several months, was once you have more money, your lifestyle becomes more expensive, right? You spend money on things that you didn't really have the money to spend on. So then you sort of get locked into, oh yeah, I got to make X amount. So this is what I could do. So I've seen a lot of my friends who started off in indie film with me 20 years ago just fall off and go into just, doing high-paying corporate gigs and just losing the enthusiasm for filmmaking. And that's fine. People change.
And here's the other thing, right? So, I mean, I'll give an example. Like one day on a shoot on a commercial, the gear that you have, and everything is you have your DPs, you have all your crew, you have 20, 30 people on set, and you have a crane and you have a dolly and you have all these things, right? Once you get comfortable in that space, it's very, very difficult to go and make a man, for example, just from my own work, or Three Worlds, like it's difficult to make that transition. Most people cannot, because now you've already set your anchor points to what you need to actually produce work.
Yeah, it's like that one comedian says, after having a certain kind of girlfriend, you can't go back.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine from like an artist perspective, it'd be like going from using a Cintiq or a Wacom tablet in the office to do your animations to going home where you just have an old school animation desk and, you know, paper and pen.
No doubt.
You get kind of seduced by the high end equipment and the convenience and the pay and the lifestyle, like eating a really nice snack, but then you make an entire meal out of a snack, and then after you're done, you just don't want to move.
Yeah,
You're sapped of energy and motivation.
Right.
Yeah, one weird and interesting and maybe unavoidable thing about being a part of the industry is what is considered success in the industry is entirely different than what is considered success as an indie filmmaker or an artist. Once you get to the success benchmarks of Hollywood or any sort of a commercial industry, I'm pretty sure it's very difficult for people to justify spending time and money making their own little side project. So, but it ultimately depends on what makes you happy. I've talked to many friends who are making good money doing things that are related to the commercial film industry, but are miserable because their dream was to be able to make their movies, and now they're saying when they retire, that's what they're going to do. Just like Lucas saying, "I'm going to make experimental films when I retire."
Yeah, I don't. What sidebar? What has Lucas done since selling off Star Wars and quote unquote retiring, besides Red Tails? I mean, I know that movie came out and flopped, and I kind of liked that movie, but I don't know if he's done anything else except complain about new Star Wars.
Yeah,
He did one. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, I think he did that one film with Vincent Gallo. I don't know if it was. Oh no, that's not Lucas. That was Francis Ford Coppola. My bad.
And now he hasn't done much, and everyone's waiting for him to get back to doing his experimental films. Which some of his earlier ones, pre-Star Wars, I've seen. Very interesting. He could have had a really interesting career as an experimental filmmaker.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps, and I'm not in his head certainly, but when you get to the point where you've sold your property to Walt Disney for $1 billion,
yeah,
and you don't have to work anymore, it kind of gets back to what we started talking about, that thrill of, you know, I have a need to get this art out, but the only way I can do it is to quote unquote borrow film equipment and go shoot it really quick and then sneak it back. You don't have that same motivation anymore because you're George Lucas. You could buy and sell an entire movie studio without even, you know, sweating it.
When I'm a billionaire, I will let you know if that's the
case. It's hard to know that. Yeah, it's hard to know that. But one thing is certain is that there is definitely, in terms of artists, there is a need to communicate. And however that communication, whatever media is chosen for that, people who are obsessive about that need to communicate will find a way, and they do find ways. So, so I don't know if Lucas ever had that kind of drive, because if he did, he would have just been making film after film after film, right? Because he's had the means for a very long time, right? And by the way, Disney got a amazing deal out of that IP, like $1 bill, $2 bill for that. I mean, look how much they flipped it around. It's insane.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So Soderbergh is a good example of someone who can switch between more commercial versus more independent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's always been able to do it.
Yeah, that's if Lucas had that kind of drive, we would see him doing stuff like that. Yeah. But I think Lucas is a very interesting story. I mean, he is one of a kind. His success with Star Wars is one of a kind. You can't really imagine what kind of how that transforms someone when your movie, I think Lucas post Star Wars is an entirely different person than Lucas pre Star Wars. When your movie redefines cinema, you have unlimited power and money. You're just a different kind of being.
True.
like the God Emperor of Dune or something.
Well, that's an interesting point. I've heard, musicians and even stand-up comics, they talk about once, when you're struggling, you've got all this material you can draw on your own life to communicate with people, and folks like hearing about those stories. But then when they get the sitcom or they get the big album and their life completely changes, they go to being millionaires on tour. It's like, how can you relate to, Jerry Seinfeld is kind of a good example. He's got this observational humor, but no one wants to hear about, the struggles of, having to choose between different kinds of caviar while you're on your, yacht. That kind of deal.
Right.
I'm watching Seinfeld and following him a lot. And he actually talks about that very thing. He says his main challenge is, and one of the things he does is he retires his material, then he hits the clubs, tries to work up new material. His pleasure in life comes from being able to be a comic. And so he doesn't really, he's trying hard not to get trapped by the wealth and success. And I think a lot of other comics and other artists are doing that also. But I think when you're poor and you're a filmmaker or an artist, you're trying to get things done, which is tough. And on the other end, it looks like when you're rich and famous and an artist, you're trying to sort of get some of the drive you had as a poor artist.
Right.
Because you're famous and you can, whatever you say, people say yes to because you have money and power.
Yeah, I mean, the way some artists deal with it is seclusion. One prime example is Terrence Malick, right? Somebody who just is out of the limelight, and in some ways, Prince also was able to do that too. I mean, he was in Minnesota, he stayed there, although his writing in terms of music really kind of never kind of evolved as much as, like, let's say if he was not a superstar. But he was cranking out records constantly, year after year after year. So there are ways, and there are definitely examples. But I think definitely you need to be out of the limelight for that to happen.
So Ian, we've brought in another ultra indie filmmaker to the Ian Simmons universe. Now you know Sujewa, you know Amir.
You got your NES in the background.
Well,
yeah, my ode to dead technology.
Yeah,
but no, this has been great, and I do appreciate you coming on, Amir, and getting both of you guys' perspectives. I think we should definitely do this again. Especially,
hopefully Amir will end up in slow romance, and we can do multiple slow romance podcast interviews when it comes out.
Oh yeah, and eventually we'll get Kendra on here. We'll have the nice 4-panel set up.
She wanted to come, but she was working. So that's an interesting story. She's her day job is being a server. So at 25 and trying to make it as an actor, she's really in there. Whereas me and Amir were older. We have a bunch of ways to make money that are kind of related to filmmaking. So that'll be interesting. We'll have me, Amir, Kendra, and the sound guy. Random sound guy, or maybe. No. I think more film critics should do this. A lot of film critics only know about or talk about Hollywood stuff. So I like the fact that you're interested in ultra indie stuff, slow cinema, experimental cinema, and so that's why I'm trying to send more ultra indie filmmakers your way.
Well, I appreciate it, and Amir, again, I appreciate you coming on, and whatever the next topic or the next show is next month. My gosh, that'll be December. That's crazy.
I hope to have Slow Romance done by then. Let's see.
All right, we'll have a wrap party episode.
There we go.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, very much, and we'll talk again soon.
Amir, how did it go? How'd you like the show?
Excellent, man. Excellent. Very cool.
Yeah, Amir's a recluse. I had to pull him out. I had to to come on the show.
You're not a curmudgeon, at least. You were very, very pleasant. So thank you.
All right, guys.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Talk to you soon.
Have a great evening.
Okay, all right, take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.